Hello everyone, I'm going to be going over the basics of HTML5, which is just an updated version of HTML where we have some new elements where the names are just more descriptive of the content. So it's just really helpful for keeping your code organized and clear. So this is the HTML5 page. You may notice we've skipped the tables page, and if you come back for web page design in the future, we'll go over that. All right, so you'll notice there are several different elements here. We're going to start with the header, and a header, not head or headings like we've covered previously, is just an element that's at the top of the page or it's at the top of some sort of subsection. Most often, the top of your page is going to be your header. So underneath our comment here, you're going to be adding a header element. I'm just going to indent a little bit so that it's clear that it's inside the body. It's always helpful to show the parent-child relationship. So opening tag for header, and my closing tag for header, again doing them at the same time so I don't forget the closing tag. And then in the middle, if this is going to be the top of my website, I might have an H1 heading. Notice that you can combine the basic HTML with HTML5 and later versions of HTML. And there we go. Now, visually speaking, the header isn't going to add anything style-wise to the appearance of the site, but it helps keep the code organized better structurally. And in the future, when we start adding CSS, again, for things like the color, the fonts, all the fun design choices, having our code organized into easily identifiable elements is going to make it a lot easier to target different areas. So we have the header. We also have nav, and this is where your navigation goes. So any menus that you have on the website, any areas with links, that's what nav is for. So obviously just short for navigation. So sometimes people put the navigation and the menu directly in the header. Sometimes it might be afterwards. That's a matter of personal preference and how you want things to look. So I'm going to have my opening tag for nav, my closing tag for nav, and then inside of nav I would have any number of links. So I'm going to add my anchor element, href equals, inside of quotes, just to save some time, I'm doing a hashtag, so a placeholder link, and maybe this first link would be going to the home page, then a closing tag for my link. I often will just copy and paste Command C and Command V when I want to have multiple of the same thing. So I have multiple links, so I'm just going to copy them, paste them, and switch out the content to be accurate. So maybe I have an about page, maybe there's a contact page, and if I had actual links, I would be updating them to be accurate for the pages that we're going to. So when I submit, you can see the links are all in a row because they're inline elements. They're inside of nav, but visually, nothing else is going on. All right. Next up, we have main, and this is just used to contain the main content of your page. So for most cases, that's going to come underneath your nav. So main and end of main. And for now, I'm just going to say hello world, but I'll switch that out in a moment. All right, there we go. So main content, pretty self-explanatory. Now for other areas of the page, we have sections. So this is just for smaller areas of content. You could have multiple of any of these elements. You could have multiple headers. You could have the header for the main part of the page. You could have a header for a small subsection. You could have multiple navs because you have different types of navigation. You could have multiple main elements, but you're more likely to have multiple sections. So just, again, to keep different areas organized. So I'm going to actually move hello world in, and I'm going to add a section around it. I can have more than one. I'm just going to do one. Visually, absolutely nothing changes. It's just helping me keep the code itself clearer. And again, that'll let me change, like maybe my section's going to have a different background color. It'll let me change those sorts of things in the future. All right. Now, an article is intended to contain complete self-contained information that could be displayed completely by itself. So, like a magazine article or a newspaper article. It's not something that needs everything else around it. It's something that could be completely by itself. You might have multiple articles. You might have just one. So, after my section, I'm going to add an article. So there we go for the article. And actually, I would probably, if I'm having text inside the article, I would probably have that inside a paragraph. So again, you'll often be combining the older versions of HTML with the newer versions of HTML. Next up, we have asides. So an aside is for secondary information, and it's generally intended to be displayed on the side, so like a left sidebar or a right sidebar. I think I'm going to add mine after main. Now, an interesting thing about the aside is that it doesn't actually automatically move the content to the left or to the right. That's something that we need to do with the CSS later on. But it does let us know when we're reading the code, oh, this is an aside. It should be a sidebar, or it should be on one side or the other. So if you're coming back to your website after a long period of time, or you're looking at somebody else's code, it makes it a lot easier to follow. And that's the benefit of all the HTML5. All right, and we also have the footer. So this is usually the very bottom of the page where you have the copyright information. It might just be the bottom of some other section or article or whatever it happens to be. Might just be the bottom of some sort of area on the page, but most often the very bottom of the page itself. On the bottom of the page, the footer always contains the copyright. It might also contain links to major parts of the website, so that maybe if you've done a lot of scrolling, so that you can get back to them more quickly than scrolling all the way up to get to the menu. Or maybe you're using JavaScript in your menu, and if someone doesn't have JavaScript working, they need to still be able to have working links. All right, so I'm going to add that after the aside. Now, a lot of people just copy and paste the copyright symbol, and that is not going to display properly. You want to write it as an HTML entity. And the way that we do that is we have an ampersand and copy, semicolon, whatever the current year is. And somewhere over here you also include the name of the copyright holder. That's something that sort of pointless having a copyright if you don't say who has it. Now notice the footer doesn't automatically go all the way to the bottom of the page. That is something that, again, we control based on the amount of content that we have or the CSS that we set up later to control the visual end of things. Now, the last thing that we have for HTML5 is figure and fig caption. Figure is intended to hold images or sometimes even video, and when you pair it with fig caption, obviously short for figure caption, it gives you a caption that automatically sticks with the image. And depending on where you place the fig caption, if it's at the bottom, the caption will go below the image. If you add it above the image inside the figure, it'll actually go above. So I'm going to maybe I'll add it after the article inside my main element. So figure is going to be the parent and a figure. I'm going to start with fig caption being above, and I might move it below so you can see the difference. And again, I always like to indent just so the hierarchy is really clear what's inside of what. So whenever I'm writing an image, I have img for image, src for source equals inside of quotes. I can use any of the images that we've used previously, so we know they're all in the images folder, and I believe there's one called sprite.gif, so I'm going to go with that image. We always want to make sure that we have the title attribute in case someone's using a screen reader or someone's hovering over the image for the tooltip. After the title or before, it doesn't really matter which order the attributes are in. We have alt, so the sprite image is missing. Alt is just the error message that shows up. Sometimes people just make it very descriptive of the image so you know what is missing. Sometimes people just say that it's missing, so that's sort of a matter of personal preference. And then we want to give this a starting size, so style equals, inside of quotes we're going to have the width, colon, whatever the size is, in this case 150 pixels, semicolon to end the width, closing quote, and my closing bracket. I can also add a / before I close if I want to. That part is completely optional. So when I submit, you can see that the figure has this automatic space on the side here, and the caption is right above the image. Now, I'm going to cut with Command X and just paste with Command V and submit again. Now notice that the caption is below because I moved Fig Caption below the image. So that's just something that is super helpful. Whenever you're using images and captions together, you definitely want to put the image inside of Figure so that you can take advantage of how Fig Caption works. So that's it for the basics of HTML5 and all of the HTML that we're going to be covering. There certainly are several other elements that we haven't covered that we may cover in the future if you stick around for web design.